But unfortunately, if it goes to become very close to what's happening now in Libya, then I don't by any means rule out the possibility of an international and regional intervention here.
For these protesters, the movement has come a long way, inspired many Yemenis and made sacrifices that calls for dialogue by the government are too late. But if the president is determined to cling to power, the opposition and the anti-government protesters say they will muster more men here in the capital and across the country to put an end to what they describe as an autocratic regime. Hashim Al-Barra, AlJazeera, Sana'a.
All right, let's talk weather now. Steph Coulter has joined me here in the studio to talk about the Philippines. Lots of rain there, Steph.
That's right. Yesterday, we had a tropical cyclone formation alert over the southern parts of the Philippines. And that means it looks like there seems to be a tropical development happening. There may be a cyclone developing within 24 hours. Now, that cyclone didn't actually happen, but it doesn't really matter for the people who live there because there was just torrential amounts of rain. We saw 271 millimetres of rain in the southeast.
As the fog hangs warily over London, we can always offer you the perfect pick-me-up.
And actually, I can show you that area of cloud on the satellite picture as the cyclone nearly developed. It was here just off the southeast. You can see the area of cloud just not moving anywhere in a great hurry, continuing to rain there in Hinatuan, and then finally begins to pull away towards the north. And in a 24-hour period, we saw 271 millimetres of rain there, and that's over the amount of rain you'd expect in half a year. So clearly an awful lot of wet weather we've already seen, and there will be more in the way of showery downpours over the next few days. For Hinatuan, though, I think the worst is over. Instead, the heavier rains are just beginning to push a little bit further north, but all the time, that eastern coast is going to see yet more wet weather. Now, as we head further towards the west, we can see lots of cloud here piling its way through parts of Iran, through Pakistan, through Afghanistan, and into the northern parts of India. Now, this area of cloud has given us a fair amount of wet weather and a lot of snow as well, and there is more still to come as we head through the next couple of days. To the south of that, largely fine and dry, until you head down to the extreme south and through Sri Lanka. And here, the clouds and showers are going to continue over the next few days. Now, here in Doha, it's pretty hot at the moment. We've got the temperatures today up at 32 degrees. It won't be that hot as we head through the next few days. This time, the wind's coming down from the north.
Qatar Airways, world's 5-star airline.
All right, still ahead on this news hour, we'll have the story of Gaddafi's Ukrainian nurse, the latest person to desert the Libyan leader. And as Chile remembers the victims of last year's earthquake, we look at why the government is facing criticism over the reconstruction efforts. But first, a reminder of our top stories on Al Jazeera if you're just joining us. The Reuters news agency is reporting that opposition forces in Libya have shot down a military aircraft near the town of Misrata and captured its crew. Reuters is quoting a witness who says fighting for control of a military airbase is still going on. Libya is top of the agenda at a meeting of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, attended by foreign ministers from around the world. The UN Human Rights Chief has called on world nations to back uprisings in Arab world in words and deeds. Al-Baiji Qaed al-Sebsi has been named as Tunisia's new interim prime minister. He replaces Mohamed Ghannouchi, who resigned on Sunday. The leadership change follows renewed protests on Saturday, in which 5 people died. And this Tunisian leadership now has also to worry about the situation at its border with Libya as a humanitarian crisis looms there. Let's speak to Al Jazeera's James Space, who is in Ras Ajdir. James, what is the situation at that border? As a lot of people have been fleeing Libya, of course, through that border.
Yes, Folly. I've been driving around the border area for the last hour, been at the border checkpoint a few moments ago. I'm now travelling the 5 kilometres to where there is a refugee camp where I was earlier on. There are thousands of people here, very hard to estimate numbers, but people living in difficult conditions. The weather conditions, obviously, this time of year, not that severe, and they do have food and water, but some complain that they've now been here for 5 days and the numbers are growing growing. When you speak to the people on the border post a few days ago, they would give you numbers about the number of people coming in from Libya. When AlJazeera spoke to them in the last few hours, they said they weren't counting anymore. They're overwhelmed by the numbers that are coming through this border, fleeing Libya. People talking about a frightening time as they made their way out of Libya, and then a very distressing time at the border as they try and get into this country, and really long delays given the number of people that are trying to make it into Tunisia.
So the Tunisian authorities, James, you say, are overwhelmed. What are they doing exactly to help these people who are coming in over the border, to assist them? What's being done?
Well, there certainly is food and there's water being supplied both by local Tunisians and by various non-government organisations who are here to help them. What is really taking place at the moment is setting up a sort of transit camp, because this isn't a static situation. There are also buses leaving this area, taking people to airports, taking people to boats. The problem at the moment is more people are coming in from Libya than they're managing to get away on those planes and also boats.
And who's been coming in exactly inside Tunisia right now? Are these mostly Tunisians who are fleeing Libya, or are we seeing various nationalities cross that border?
We're seeing various other nationalities, and I think what's absolutely clear is that the largest number are Egyptians. Some of those Egyptians we've spoken to angry. Some of them right now at the border crossing are chanting, "Where is the Egyptian army?" Clearly, that's not practical. The Egyptian army couldn't come here to Tunisia to look after them, but they feel that they are being abandoned by their government, who they feel should be doing more. No sign that I've seen of Egyptian diplomats, apart from one Egyptian diplomat who I found, who'd actually come from Cairo on leave, he said, on a personal humanitarian mission to try and help people here.
OK, James Spades reporting there from Ras Ajdir at the Libya-Tunisia border about the situation there as thousands continue to flee Libya. Well, she'd been by his side for nearly a decade, but now even Colonel Gaddafi's nurse has abandoned him. The 38-year-old may have had a close relationship with the leader, but as Neve Barker reports, she's now returned home to Ukraine.
Returning to Ukraine after 9 years at Gaddafi's side, 38-year-old Galina Kolodnitskaya is met by family at Kiev airport. She arrived with hundreds of foreign evacuees. Her story distinctly different from the many others fleeing the violence in Libya. In these undated pictures, Kolodnitskaya stands close to the heart of the Gaddafi regime. She was one of 4 Ukrainian nurses taking care of him, but a US diplomatic cable published by WikiLeaks late last year claimed the Libyan leader was deeply attached to Kolodnitskaya. The cable described her as a voluptuous blonde who always travelled with the Gaddafi as only she knew his routine. It's believed the two may have been romantically involved. Back in Ukraine, Kolodnitskaya is avoiding public attention, all while Gaddafi's leadership teeters precariously. Neve Barker, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
All right, let's talk more about Muammar Gaddafi's overseas assets and what these countries are doing about that. Paul Brennan joins us now live from London. Paul, of course, the UK has come under a lot of scrutiny over the last few weeks, but they're leading the way now in Europe on seizing Gaddafi's assets.
Certainly in Europe, yes. I mean, of course, on Friday, we had President Obama saying that the Americans would be freezing any assets that they had. And we've already had Switzerland freezing assets in their jurisdiction. But the UK now, over the weekend, before the markets opened this morning, announced that they would be freezing assets belonging to Colonel Gaddafi and to his 5 of his sons and a daughter, and also to anybody connected with them, associates and employees too. The reason why that will be significant is because although the American freezing order is headline news, in actual fact Libya didn't really have any assets over in America, so it is in Europe where much of the Libyan assets are believed to be placed. The other difficulty that we have is enforcing it. I mean, basically what's going to happen is the Treasury have issued this edict out to financial institutions, and it will then be up to the financial institutions, the banks, etc. themselves to weed out which stocks, shares, properties they manage on behalf of the Gaddafi family and prevent the Gaddafi family from actually operating them. And there's one other just small but significant factor in all of this, and that is the distinction, the very difficult distinction that will have to be made between what is actually Libyan riches and what is Gaddafi riches, because the Libyan Investment Authority, for example, which owns the sovereign wealth, the proceeds of oil and gas that Libya have, effectively it's been run as a private savings bank by the Gaddafi family. So while officially it's owned by the country, in realistic terms, it's been run by Gaddafi. And weeding out the difference between the two is going to be quite difficult for financial institutions to do.
Indeed, it's been pretty much unclear to know what Gaddafi's worth. Now, meanwhile, there are reports in British newspapers about a James Bond-style operation to stop Libyan currency printed in the UK being shipped out to Libya. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, extraordinary, this one, yes. I mean, it's quite amusing in some ways and startling in others. The reports emerged that the UK government was tipped off early last week that Gaddafi had ordered about 900 billion pounds, about $1.4 billion worth of dinar to be printed by a specialist printing firm based up in the northeast of England, which has the contract to print Libyan currency. Now, the UK government was tipped off about that. They were obviously desperate to prevent that money being printed and being shipped out to Libya, because the fear was that that money would be used to be dished out to mercenaries and to fund Gaddafi's repression of the freedom campaign that has sprung up. So first of all, they issued an export control order, but mandarins in the Whitehall offices told the government that it would take some days before that could actually come into reality. So in the meantime, they put off the Libyans by insisting, first of all, they couldn't transport that quantity of notes. Well, the Libyans said, well, we'll send a plane for it then. They then said the only plane that was going to be available would be down in Kent, several hundred miles from where the notes actually were. So all these delaying tactics gave the government time to put this control order in place, and to the relief of freedom fighters in Libya, at least, the money remains safely under lock and key here in the northeast of the UK.
Incredible story. Paul Brennan in London, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Also with us here in the studio is Ibrahim Sharkey from the Brookings Centre here in Doha. He's been watching developments throughout the region. Of course, thank you very much for being here, as always.
My pleasure.
So we see the international community taking a lot of actions, sanctions, condemnation, freezing Gaddafi's assets. Is this enough at this stage, or do you think more needs to be done?
I think these are mostly symbolic, what we have seen of most of the actions that have been taken. And I can give you one example, which is the freezing of the assets of Gaddafi in the US and the United States. Gaddafi doesn't have any assets in the United States, so it's mainly symbolic to show that there is a solidarity, there is an international community that's against what's happening in Libya, these are important. So we shouldn't undermine.
It's significant that they're certainly speaking with one voice. We heard the Russian foreign minister earlier at the UN meeting, at the human rights meeting in Geneva, saying that they condemned the brutal crackdown in Libya. This is certainly quite significant, isn't it, that they're speaking with one voice?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's especially to come from the Russian foreign minister makes it even more significant, because we know that the Russians and the Chinese in particular, they have resisted like severe, strict actions against the Gaddafi regime so far, and they try to play by the minimum, is not to go against the international community when there is a consensus. And this is what we have seen, what we have noticed in Lavrov's speech today, that he's condemning the actions in Libya, as you said exactly. So it's important, again, these sanctions, but it's not enough. What's needed at this point is to target the pressure on the regime to collapse, because we should keep in mind that this regime, the Gaddafi regime, stayed in power for over 10 years, facing sanctions, and nothing happened. So, and now we are looking for not long-term solutions, because we are looking now for short-term pressure, is to be able to provide solutions.
Right. So let me just bring to you an important, interesting point that Sergei Lavrov made in his speech in Geneva. He said that these riots in the Middle East have exposed a range of problems that need to be addressed without external intervention. Of course, in the last few days, there's been a lot of talk about a possible military intervention in Libya to separate the warring factions there. Do you think the Libyans would support that?
I highly doubt it, and I think there is no consensus even within the international community or with the West or with Russia on whether there has to be military action, because who's going to do military actions? You know, who's going to send peacekeeping force? This is too early to talk about this. It's very prematurely, and on top of this, exactly as you said, it's the Libyans themselves. I